I would start saying that there is no doubt that the European Parliament played a key role to urge the Commission and the Member States to address the Roma situation in the European Union. And the first call of the Commission on the Commission and the Council to adopt the European Roma strategy has been in place in 2008, and subsequently it took place in 2011 before the communication of the Commission. So the European Commission was urged to adopt priority areas for a strategy on Roma. Above all, there were fundamental rights and social inclusion. Now, in its 2011 resolution, the Parliament called on the Commission, and I will quote some phrases from the resolution, called the Commission to define the objectives of the framework linked to priority areas in order to protect and promote equality and non-discrimination, combat anti-Gypsyism, prejudices, stereotypes, racism and xenophobia, stigmatization and hate speech against Roma, notably by ensuring full implementation of relevant legislation and imposing appropriate punishment for racially motivated crimes, ensure that media do not disseminate prejudice against the Roma community, set up dialogue between local authorities, judicial bodies, police, and the Roma community in order to abolish discrimination in judicial sphere, improve confidence and combat ethnic profiling. Now, there is absolutely no coincidence that the Parliament has urged the Commission to tackle above all discrimination against Roma and anti-Gypsyism, because ERRC's human rights work, and not only ERRC's human rights work, but all the work of the Roma NGOs are highlighting the fact that we are still witnessing violent attacks against Roma. What is happening on the ground? Only a low number of cases, of reported cases, are ending in convicting somebody, and only in low cases, racially motivation, it is investigated by the authorities. Illegal returns of Roma are taking place all around European countries, and in most of the situations, they are accompanied by stigmatization of Roma. If we are looking into the political sphere, it is more than obvious that extremist political parties and politicians have sharpened their anti-Romani rhetoric. Now, unfortunately, even mainstream politicians engage in anti-Gypsyism in political discourse, and there is no adverse consequences. Educational segregation against Roma is still in place in many countries. Housing segregation in many countries is still in place, and sometimes as a result of deliberate government policies. Discrimination also remains a barrier in access to health, and reform in social and health issues are still not taking place. Now, if you are looking to the communication of the Commission, it is obviously, and there is no doubt, this was a major step forward adopted this year with the communication on the EU framework. And the framework, it represents a significant shift in the EU approach towards the Roma policy. However, the framework falls far short of fully tackling the challenges of Roma exclusion, which are, as the resolution calls, intimately linked to the widespread hostility or discrimination against the Roma people. While the framework recognizes the need to fight discrimination and to ensure equal access of Roma to fundamental rights, it fails to specifically address measures to combat discrimination, intimidation, anti-Gypsyism, hate speech by the member states. So in this respect, we could say that the framework is far away from fulfilling the recommendations from the European Parliament resolution. Now, in the context of electoral success of hate-mongering, far-right political parties across European member states, anti-Romani riots, political discourse which are denigrating Roma or scapegoating Roma, one cannot but ask itself, how would the government adequately address Roma exclusion when this is happening, in their countries? So it is extremely crucial that the European Parliament will urge the Commission to do everything within its remit and competences to signal that a strong and effective approach is needed when it comes to combat social exclusion of Roma. And we still have to say something. Legislation alone is not enough. We do have a racial directive in place, and the Commission is up to monitor this implementation of the directive in the member states. But legislation alone is not enough. And I could give you only two examples. Two cases which were judged by the European Court of Human Rights dealing with segregation and education of Roma children, even though when local authorities are trying to desegregate or to put together Roma with non-Roma, what they are facing? They are facing obstacles from the non-Roma, which don't want to have Roma in the schools together with their non-Roma children. So is it enough to address this by legislation? No. We need policies. We need measures from the member states to address this kind of situations. That's why it is extremely important that the member states are urged to adapt their strategies. First of all, to exceed the minimum thematic areas which are outlined in the framework, and to include actions to tackle and prevent discrimination, and in particular anti-Romani sentiment. They must articulate the strong commitment to non-discrimination, awareness-raising measures to tackle prejudice, discrimination, and anti-Gypsyism as a precondition for inclusion. And this should target Roma and non-Roma as well, because the focus should be on active citizenship and sharing responsibilities. The Commission also has a vital role to play in order to promote participation of Roma and to urge the Member States to ensure that the participation of Roma is a bottom-up effective one at all levels, including development, decision-making, implementation, raising awareness of rights and duties in this process. Now, one of the most valuable proposals from the communication of the Commission, it is introduced by a call to a robust monitoring mechanism, which will measure the individual progress on each member state. However, this mechanism needs to be further developed. It is not very clear from the communication what would be the substance of this robust mechanism. So, in this regard, the European Parliament should further call on the Commission to take a leading role in reviewing state progress reports and also shadow reports from civil society, and then the Commission to produce its annual conclusion on the state compliance, member states' compliance with the framework. So such a robust mechanism should ensure the review, and also we should not forget that it's a 10-year strategy. It should ensure the adaptation of the strategies, the updates which are necessary on a regular basis, and should report on the implementation and the progress which is made by the national plans, and it should include indicators in order to see exactly what is happening on the ground. Now, I will stop here saying that there is plenty of valuable lessons, experience, and good practices already existing in place on the decade of Roma inclusion, and we should take into account all these experiences, and we should not start the framework strategy from a zero moment, because we are not at the zero moment. We have to take into account all the experiences which took already place in several member states, and we should build on that and construct on those gaps which are existing in order to improve the situation. Thank you very much.